Hey, everybody.
Happy New Year!
Yay, welcome to 2026. Thanks for being here with us for another year of our exciting podcast and all the stuff that we have to talk to you guys about.
Love that.
Okay, well, today we were just talking. This is like a huge topic, and I cannot believe that we really have not covered this
I
yet.
know, we've talked about it in
Um,
different ways, but I guess not in the actual way.
yeah, I know, and I could have sworn to it, but okay. Today we're going to talk about grief. I mean, heavy topic
Heavy.
for sure. We did talk about pet loss a couple episodes back, so that's like a little intro. But I think it's important to talk about grief for a number of reasons. One, because pretty much everyone ever goes through it in some way. But I think it's also important to recognize that it's not only about like loss of life, it can be loss of other things too.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel like
So,
grief
yeah.
is one of those things that people don't, we're all about labeling emotions to try to understand and really like pinpoint what you're feeling.
Yeah.
And some people would just say sad or like upset. And I'm like, no, it's grief. Like I can instantly, depending on what they're talking about, I'm like,
Yeah.
oh no, you're talking about missing something that either you can't go back to
Mm-hmm.
or that's so changed or a loss of something, which when I say loss of something, we think grief of death, but I'm like,
Yeah.
loss of an idea, a
Mm-hmm.
loss of an imagination, a loss of something you planned, a loss of a stage of your life that's over, a loss
Yeah.
of, you know, when we had the pregnancy episodes, a lot when women are like, oh, I've accepted I'm not having any more kids, but there's like the grief of like, I'll never have that again.
Yeah.
And I don't think people label it as grief because it doesn't maybe feel as big as when you like some of them do, but it doesn't like maybe your life adjustment griefs doesn't feel like, oh my God, somebody died and it's heart wrenching like grief
Yeah.
where you're not able to breathe and you're not able to wake like you're miserable. And I think that's why people don't label it like that. But what do you think?
I think so. I mean, grief is such a complex experience in addition to a complex feeling that I think sometimes it's really hard to give it the right name. Like, that's very similar to what happens with like abuse, right? Grief and abuse, I feel like, are two huge experiences that people feel that once they put that label on it, it changes what the meaning of that experience is for them. And in reality, it's more complex than that. And I think that that's exactly what you were just describing, that it can be an umbrella term for a lot of different things. Just really any experience of loss or unexpected shifts in what something means or the role of something in your life, you know? So I definitely agree with you there that sometimes it's a little nebulous and we tend to tiptoe around calling an experience like a grief experience because I think it's supposed to feel sad, right? It's not necessarily that people feel it can be transformative. And it
Right.
really is a perspective shift, you know? For me, like when I talk about grief with clients and it's not about like a death, which is typically what we think of, right? Like we think of something extremely devastating, like a loss of life, but it can also be, like you said, a loss of potential, you know, a loss of identity, someone in your life who is really someone that you didn't think that they were. And now you feel like, wow, I lost a person.
Yeah.
You know, I even talk about it sometimes in terms of like when I dealt a lot in tobacco, you know, people were having a really hard experience of like giving up their cigarettes. And I was like, well, why? And they were like, well, I lost my best friend.
Yeah.
Like that was my comfort. That was my best friend. I'm like, yeah, like that's a little bit of a grief experience. It's not as significant, maybe, as you might say when someone passes away, but like that's a loss for you. It's a loss of a comfort, it's a loss of a coping mechanism, of routine. And that's what I mean. I think we mean when we say that it's like very complex and there's a lot of ways to categorize grief.
Right.
So,
I think
yeah,
we say this a lot in our episodes, and I think it's just important, so I always re-say it. Like when we talk about spectrums, when we talked about trauma, right? We're always like, trauma's a
yeah,
spectrum. Like you have people that have such abusive trauma that it's very complicated, and then you have people that don't talk about their trauma because it's not severe,
yeah,
or it's like the emotional abuse a range, right? Like, okay, there's a spectrum of abuse. But when we talk about this kind of stuff, it's the same grief is has a range too, where it's like
Yeah.
It might be little grievances, but it's still grief in different forms. And
Hmm.
it's not as maybe doesn't feel as horrible as the death of somebody, but it's maybe a death of an experience or a death of a chapter, a death
Yeah.
of moving forward, a loss, things like that. Because even when you brought up tobacco, like you said it, and I was going to say it before you did, was a routine, a loss of a routine when you're like,
Yeah.
oh, that used to be part of me. Like that used to
Hmm.
be part of my life and now I am like sober. I gave that up and I
Yeah.
miss it. Like I don't even if you're like I don't want to live that life again. I don't want to go back there, but
Yeah.
I'm always going to miss it.
Hmm. Yeah. And there is also no timeline on grief. The number one question I get when we go through an experience of the grieving process with someone, regardless of what the triggering event is, when am I going to feel better?
Hmm.
And my answer is always the same. Like, there literally is no right answer to that. There are people that lose a spouse, there are people that lose a child, and in a couple of months, they're like pretty back to normal. And the people around them are like, wow, that was fast. But then there are people that take decades to get
Right.
over it. Not get over it, but, to really get past that initial shock and the denial and the bargaining and all of those nitty gritty stages of grief that are really hard. And when you hit acceptance, that's where the real recovery starts. So,
Hmm.
you have to go through all of that, the denial, the bargaining, the depression, the woe is me kind of feelings, the why wasn't it me feeling. Is this really happening? It's a
Yep.
complex experience, right? Um, but there's no right answer.
Right.
And I think that's really hard, because that's one of the hard things about the availability of things on the internet, I feel like, because I have a couple of clients right now that are dealing with loss by death. And they're like, well, other people are moving on so fast and like they're doing pretty okay. And I'm just like, yeah, but it's okay that you're not, Don't feel like you're behind because your process looks different. Your life looks different. The way the person passed looks different. Like there are a lot of factors here that are going to impact like how troubling the experience is for you. Like, was it
Right.
traumatic? Was it chronic? Was it expected? Was it sudden?
And what was the relationship like? Like you hear, I've
Yeah.
heard siblings, older siblings talk about this and, when it comes to death and like a parent dies and there's like somebody who might say like I'm sad but like I feel bad cuz my brother feels so much worse than me. Like
Yeah.
but his process, relationship experience, whatever is different, right?
Hmm.
And that's okay. And I think that's what's hard. I think it's hard because like you said we don't get over it.
Yeah.
There's also a part of grief that I at least always say, and I do this for myself a lot. I accept that it lingers in the background and it's always there.
Yeah.
There's just seasons of time where it comes more in the forefront of my life where I'm like triggered or I'm feeling it more. And then it goes back on the shelf a little bit. And then it's
Yeah.
like, and then I have a sadness like, damn, it's really going to be there forever. Like,
Yeah.
it's not going anywhere. But the more I've like, let me work with that and just be okay with that,
Yeah.
you know? Like I have to be okay with yeah, there's going to be moments that I just get triggered and I miss my family. Like that's one of those ones we talked about. Like
Yeah.
you live far away from your family. Like I'm like I literally have accepted there's
Yeah.
grief all the time in my background, holidays, events, experiences
Hmm.
I want to have with my family that I know I'm not going to have
Yeah.
and I really want, but the reality is that I'm never going to have that.
And I
So,
think that that's a perfect example right there of acceptance, which is that breakthrough moment in the whole experience where you know that there's permanence in grief, which is a painful realization, but it's also important. You know that that thing is never going to come back or be the same. And if that's a point that you can be relatively at peace with, then that's where you can start to kind of grow and incorporate it into your life, right? Grief comes in waves, like you said. It's not something that you're just going to put on a shelf and never touch again.
right.
So if you do that and say, well, you know what? Just not going to focus on that. When it does get triggered, when it does come back and hit you, it's going to suck a lot,
Right.
like a lot.
Right. It's like, how do I get a taste of it and then be
Yeah,
like, it's okay. I'm going to keep tasting it, having these moments and triggers, and I'm not scared of it. But if you're like
right.
avoidant and then you get hit with something, it feels like bigger because you're still in that denial.
Yeah, for sure. So I wanted to ask you, what do you think as a professional? is healthier? Maybe it's not necessarily a fair question, but what do you think helps people more when they're grieving very outwardly? In other words, they're very public about their grief and they're reaching out for support in lots of ways. They're kind of making it like a huge part of their life to just go through this experience publicly. Or do you think it's something more common for people to grieve very internally and deal with it like as a private process? Does that make sense?
I think so. I would say my answer to that is both.
Yeah,
I think I don't think it's healthy to make it your life.
sure.
But do I think I will 100% stand by this when I say grieving, and maybe not, I'm not going to say in the sense of talking about it. I think that might
Hmm.
be part of it.
Yeah,
Sometimes it might look like I know when I was grieving this year, when I had a loss, most of the time I didn't want to talk about it.
yeah,
I wasn't like, let me talk about my feelings. It was just like me crying and my boyfriend being like, not even saying anything and coming and hugging and me crying harder and then
yeah.
having that moment and then like okay like and so like that support felt really nice, or when my friends
Hmm.
would be like, hey, like checking in, and then
Yeah,
maybe that day it's kind of like, well, damn, yeah, I really miss this person, or like this is
yeah.
what's going,
Hmm.
sometimes. And then other times it was kind of like, I don't want to fucking talk to anybody about it. Like today I want to like feel it by myself.
Yeah,
And when somebody says like, hey, are you good, I might do the like, I'm sad, but yeah, I'm good.
yeah,
And I'm having my own internal like thoughts. And so I think there's like a balance of both.
sure.
I think it's everything we talk about on a lot of our episodes of, I think there has to be a range, because I think you get in weird territory when you're like, like I don't, you might have heard this when people talk about like cancer.
Yeah.
And like there's a shift of cancer I like with cancer survivors, that like one of my clients said like the first year she was in it and she was grieving like the scariness of it and accepting that she had it, had the surgery, was in recovery, everything was clear, and then she was going to these cancer groups. And then she looked at me one day and was like, is it fucked up if I stop going, because like I don't want cancer to be my life.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to go to these support groups and keep talking about the same thing over and over and over, because I feel like I can't find who I am.
Yeah.
And I was like, absolutely, I agree with that. Like, if you
Hmm.
feel like that was enough for you, and guess what? The next person might come in and say, I love going to those meetings every week and I love sharing my story and I love what it does for me. And then I still have my life outside of it.
Yeah.
But that might not be for everyone. I think that's why it's like our therapy stuff is hard, because it's so individualistic.
Yeah.
So with that, it's like if you're literally living in the grief of something, like I'm telling people 24/7 all the time, that's all I can talk about,
Yeah.
then you're like, I would say you're kind of dwelling and staying and living in it.
Hmm.
And you're not giving yourself time to like be out of it and just like, let me just talk to my friend and like not talk about it. Let me just escape
Yeah.
like what's going on.
Right.
Versus the opposite of that. If you go all internal,
Hmm.
the like a lot of the research shows, if you like listen, like, oh, I didn't do the research, but if you think about a lot of the people who study grief and teach it, a lot of it is like loneliness kills. And
Yeah.
so when you're going through an experience and feeling so much grief alone, grief is already the hardest emotion to feel, especially a death. It feels so lonely that going inside and internal and not having support, to like that example I gave of just like a hug or not
Hmm.
accepting that, can cause so many other issues.
Yeah.
I just think it's a balance, if I answered your question.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. And I think, again, like there is a range of everything because there are some people who deal with a loss by externalizing their grief a lot and making it like I am this person who went through this experience and that's everything you need to know about me, right? And there's that extreme and then there's the other extreme where there is that self-imposed loneliness because they don't share it with anyone and they don't also want to process it themselves, but then it's overwhelming. So, I mean, I can think of it's very relevant for my caseload right now. I have many clients who are presenting with different experiences of grief. And it's interesting too, because I think that it is something to consider. Like, I think it's one of those covering emotions where you have this anger and this shame and this embarrassment a lot of the time, either towards themselves because they went through something that they lost, or towards the person that is no longer in their life, or the animal, or the job, or whatever it is. And sometimes it presents as like, I'm just so angry all the time. And like that can't possibly be what grief is to me, right? Like this is a me problem. And it's like, no, you're angry because of the experience. Like let's unpack that a little bit. You know, what are you angry at? And a lot of the time it's like, well, I'm alone now. I have to raise kids by myself. I mean, grief can be because of so many things. It's not, again, it's not just a death, right? It's a breakup. I have a client right now where I was like, girl, do you think you're like in grief? And she was like, holy shit. Yeah, like I think that's what it is. You know, this was a person that like isn't really who I thought they were.
Right.
That's crazy.
Right.
And but like how wild is that? That it is so applicable, right? And you really think about it, a person can be alive and you can grieve them. And we talked about this to some extent in like our friendships episode, right? You put that grave on their contact info and they are dead, but they are well alive
Right.
somewhere, just not to you.
Right.
And that still stings and it hurts and it's painful.
I think because I'm like, if you ask any of my clients, especially my group will laugh because we all do check-ins and I teach about grief a lot. And I'm like, if you guys know anything about me, you know, like I talk about grief a lot because I experience it a lot and I'm very aware
Yeah.
of when I'm feeling it and why I'm feeling it and how often it comes for different things. And why I like this episode and why I like grief in general is I think grief is one of those emotions that you have with every situation. There's not one client. If I
Yeah.
went through my client list this week, I guarantee there's that one moment they've seen me or now where they've talked about something in their life where we've processed grief around it.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things to get really comfortable with,
Yeah.
because as soon as we started this episode, I'm like, well, yeah, I teach literally in everything. Like, even my clients this week, you'll get this one. One of my clients, she was so excited because her daughter turned one, her first baby turned one, and then she started crying in the middle of the session, and I was like, what's going on? She's like, I'm so happy she's one, but oh my God, she's not a
Yeah.
baby. And she started
Yeah.
crying, and she's like, I'm never gonna have like that newborn with her. And it was like the coolest thing to watch her have both, right?
Yeah.
I'm like,
Right.
she's so excited watching her daughter grow, but the grief of watching her daughter grow, knowing, and like that happens throughout parenting in every stage,
100%. Yeah.
losses. I had another client, she started talking about she had a loss at
Mhm.
the end of last year.
Yeah.
She had a pregnancy loss and it still popped up during the holidays and she was like all happy, like, oh my God, Christmas was the best. Me and my daughter had a great time, and then she starts crying. What happened? And then all these triggers around my loss because I was
Yeah.
like, we would have had two and blah 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 blah. So when you think about the pregnancy realm, you have grief. When you think about parenting, you have grief. You think about death, you have grief. You think about breakups and relationships, you have grief. You think about friends, there's grief. You think about aging, you have grief. You think about,
Yeah.
oh, my high school, I have grief. I move, I have grief. Like every topic that somebody
Mhm.
brings to us, there's at some point grief is going to come up, and I'm like the first person to be like, well, we got to point it out because you're going to keep telling me
Yeah.
you're sad, but when I ask you what are you sad about, you kind of don't know how to label. You're like, I don't
Yeah.
know, I'm just sad that things are different, or I don't know why I'm really sad. I'm like, sad about the idea that you, like, I had this during the holidays. I was like, dang, I really want to be at my grandparents' house.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, that's so cool. Like, and I went there in my mind. And then when I opened my eyes, I was like, damn, I'll literally never be there again.
Yeah.
And that thought made me like, I could feel it. Like the grief of like, oh, I legit will never walk into their house again.
Yeah.
But all
Wow.
those memories are stored in my brain. So like that nostalgic grief was there.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, like, yeah, I live with that every time I get triggered about a holiday or some nostalgia, or I go home, that pops up.
Yeah.
My old house. Every time I go to my parents' house now, I go home and I'm like, oh, I like their cozy house. But this isn't I miss my other house. I miss the house I grew up in. Grief.
Yeah.
Like, it comes up in like everything you do because you're always
Yeah.
aging and having stages. So I just feel like because people don't label it as grief, they don't process grief in the way. They just say they're sad, if
Right.
that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I think that you hit the nail on the head there. That's why it's important to discern a little bit, like with context, where the root of that emotion is coming from. Like, okay, let's do a little digging. Like, it's the holidays, you're sad. Why are you sad? Okay, because you miss certain things. Okay, well, what exactly do you miss? Who do you miss? What about it? Well, that's grief. You know, like it is one of those things that, again, it's an umbrella. But just for like some educational purposes, obviously, like everybody knows, and we've just talked about this, like there are the stages of grief, right, that people go through. But I feel like when I teach about it, because we like to see things in a spectrum, like there are other theories about the way that grief happens. And to me, I see it as you fluctuate between looking at like life and loss, right? And how you cope with loss versus how you restore to life. And there is a model, a grief model that I've been doing a lot of research about because I think it is a little bit more of that flexibility that we like to work with clients where, you're kind of oscillating, right, between, well, my life has changed a lot. Okay, but now I have a new identity. Oh, but now I don't know who I am because I was somebody different with this person, this stage, whatever. What do I need to do to get back to normal? Like new schedule, new this, new that. Like how do I navigate triggers? And you're constantly going from one to the other, right? Which I think is more natural when you explain what to expect from a grieving process to someone. Like, okay, where are you now? Are you like restoring your life or are you coping with loss? And those two things can exist at the same time, but usually we're more in one than the other.
Right.
Right now, like I had a client who's dealing with a loss, and they're like, well, certain holidays remind me a lot of my partner because that was my partner's favorite time of the year, and it really sucks. And I'm like, okay, dude, like, how are we gonna work through this? Like, are you gonna sit here and just like wallow that it was her holiday and it's hard for you? Or like, what can we do to make it meaningful for you? Like, you need to find a way to find meaning and purpose in something that was also important to your partner.
Right.
And that was helpful, I think, because it's not minimizing the person's pain, but it's also showing you can have pain and also move forward and also make
Right.
it meaningful. And you can rewrite that narrative a little bit so that it's not as painful.
Right.
Maybe,
Absolutely.
how can you honor someone or an experience while also feeling the hurt of it?
Right.
Two things can be true. Grief is like the perfect example of that.
Absolutely. Because I like what you're saying because in order to not wallow in it,
Mm-hmm.
granted, I am going to tell people it's okay to have a pity party here and there.
Million percent. Yeah.
I hate when people are like, "Oh, I wallow in it." I'm like, "No. If you need to take a pity, have a day. Like you can feel bad for yourself and be like, well, I mean, that's fine. Have a day.
Right.
Just don't wallow in it. Live in it. Longevity, as in, like the example I gave with my grandparents. The only example that I could come up with is I let myself feel. I was so sad. I'm like, I wish I could. That's so.
Yeah.
And then I went, okay, so like, what do I want my holidays to start looking like moving forward?
Yeah.
Like, because this isn't it. Okay, I feel more lonely. I miss all my cousins. I miss my grandparents' house. But what was it about my grandparents' house besides just missing them in their house?
Yeah.
It was this. It was the experience. It was having so many people together. I'm like, okay, how do I bring some of the stuff I loved and it's going to look
Hmm.
totally different with different people?
Yeah.
But what does that need to look like moving forward? Like, what do I want to do different next year to bring some of those traditions? Or like, do I want to invite more people? Or do I want to plan with my friends? Or do I want to make sure I put on the calendar? Do I want to go home? Do I like, but there's like,
Yeah.
now you're game planning with yourself where you're like,
Right.
all right, I'm still not saying I'm not sad about it, but now I'm
No.
like, how do I make this feel a little lighter next year?
Yeah.
And even though it's still going to be painful next year, always, I'm accepting of that. I'm like,
Sure.
oh, let me have stuff I can look forward to implanting there
Yeah.
that will give me a little bit of joy while I'm having the sadness.
Yeah.
It's the same when we talk about when people are like, oh, you should just feel grateful, right? Like you always say, two things can exist at once. How do you feel maybe disappointed or upset, but you can still be grateful for stuff going? You can feel both because the
Yeah.
more you can do both things, and especially in grief, it's going to help you move through it more quickly, or I'm not even going to say quickly, healthier.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I like what you're saying there because that's the way that we deal with teaching someone like a revision of the narrative, right? It's a way to feel something. I hope my client listens to this. I teach him sit in the suck.
You have to listen, client. I don't know
You
who
need to
you are, but
listen,
listen to
right?
this.
And this is like the one thing that he's always like you always say to me. But you need to sit in it, but also have a way to pivot from it too, because otherwise you're on a very lonely and painful road. So, yes, you can be really sad and you can be in your memories and in your feelings. But if you have a jumping off point to say, you know what, it also kind of felt really good to remember those positive things and like dedicate some time
Yeah.
to honor that, that feels good. Like I can do that and not be spiraling. That's really cool. You
Yeah.
know, finding ways like here are just some strategies maybe like before we hop off, you know. Find a way to incorporate if this is loss of a loved one, something that you used to do with them, maybe with your children or with other family members. You know, like example for me, growing up, my grandparents always got me like the number of balloons for my birthday. And, you know, when my grandfather passed away, that kind of stopped for me. And that was
Mhm.
really hard because that was part of my life. But now with my kids, I do that for their birthday.
Yeah.
And I think like I always have a fondness because it's like on my birthday, I'm kind of sad, you know, because that stopped for me. But I can do it with my kids and I can explain to them, like, hey, you know who did this for me? Like somebody you never met. And it
Yeah.
was amazing. So, doing things like that is a way to perpetuate traditions and
Mhm.
memories without making it necessarily painful on purpose.
Yes, and I want to add this because I know we're going to run out of time, but I wanted to note why I also said have a pity party because when I say pity party, I think you can be give yourself a moment to feel negative emotions but also be negative like if you have to have that fuck this, like fuck everything victim, kind of like a little victim mentality for a second.
Hmm. Yeah,
I'm never going to tell you to stay in that because that's not going to get you
yeah,
anywhere. But if you have
right.
to have a day where you're like, woe is me, why? Okay, cool, have that moment. But where people get really stuck
Hmm.
is they're not just emotional anymore. They're not saying,
Yeah,
I'm sad. They're saying, I'm sad and everything's gonna suck and nothing's gonna get better.
yeah,
Woe is me. I just miss everything I had. And now we're treading very, very harshly on Depression 101, which is
yeah,
if you don't feel your emotion and figure it out, and you don't catch your voice of being woe is me vibe like that negative voice, that critical judgmental keeping you stuck, that's like what I call doubling down. Now you're feeling a negative emotion, but now your negative thoughts are going to put you deeper in the hole, and
yeah,
that is hard to get out of because now I say you're doubling down on yourself. You're
yeah,
not just feeling emotions in reality, you're
hmm,
giving yourself shitty emotions from your thoughts now.
yeah,
And that's when people get very, very stuck. So when I teach this a lot, I'm like, feel your emotions, but make sure you're not being negative.
yeah,
And negative emotions are different than being negative thought wise.
100%. Yeah, I love that. And emotions are information. Also, I'll die on this hill. You're
Yeah.
sad. Let's like think about why. What's your
Yeah.
trigger? What can you recognize next time? How can we get through it? Is it avoidable? Is it workable? Is it present all the time? What do we do with that? So,
So
yeah, I mean, yep.
take our tools and tell us about your grieving stories. Like I love why I would love to hear anybody who's like, you know what? No, this I love to hear a new grieving story that it doesn't that might not have crossed my mind. Like I said a few
Yeah.
of them that I'm used to hearing, but I love when somebody's like, no, this thing, and I'm like, oh my God, yes, like that thing also causes grief. Like
Hmm.
give it to me, give it to us. We want to hear it. I want to know it. I want to be enlightened by it because it comes in every shape and form. So
Yeah, we'd love to, as always, please share with us. Please give us feedback. And I guess we'll see you next time.
see you next time, squad. Thanks for joining us.
Bye.
Bye.